They didn't whisper. That's the part that stuck with me. They didn't even bother to keep their voices down. I was 3 steps away in the pantry, organizing Owen's allergy snacks, when I heard Tessa say, plain as a grocery list, "Let's not invite her. It's just going to make things harder." I remember pausing mid-reach for the rice crackers, just stood there, hand hovering stupid in the air like I'd forgotten how arms worked. I wasn't supposed to hear it. But that didn't make it hurt less. In fact, it might have made it worse. Michael's voice came next, flat rehearsed. "Yeah. I think she'd slow us down. No hesitation, no guilt, just agreement." I didn't cry, not right then. I just closed the cabinet quietly and sat back down at the kitchen table, acting like I hadn't heard my only child cross me off a list I hadn't even known I was on. The planning continued. Sonoma, late October. A big villa near the vineyards, something Instagrammable, with rustic stone walls and a fire pit. Tessa talked about matching pajamas for the kids' s'mores night, maybe even a wine tour if she could talk her sister into babysitting. Not once did my name come up again. To them, I was just a helper who didn't need the break. I could stay home, check the mail, feed the cat, and send birthday cards for the neighbors' kids. Keep the calendar straight, be available. I always was. I always had been. Michael and Tessa never said I wasn't welcome outright. That's not their style. They're polite, efficient, the kind of people who ask what flavor cake you like and then buy something neutral just in case. I sat there pretending to read the flyer from church, but my eyes couldn't focus. I heard Owen bouncing on the couch, practicing lines for his school play. Sadie was arguing with Alexa in the corner, trying to get her to play the Encanto soundtrack for the 5th time. I was present, physically, but I might as well have been drywall. Later that night, as I did the dishes, Michael leaned against the doorway, phone in hand, scrolling like always. "Hey, Mom, that week in October? You're still okay to watch the kids while we're in Sonoma, right? You'll have the house to yourself." To himself, he sounded generous, thoughtful even. Of course, I said. Of course I'm okay. That's what I said. Because that's what I do. But in that moment, with water running over my hands and his words soaking into the air, I realized something that took me 76 years to admit they had stopped seeing me a long time ago. Not just as a woman, not even as a mother, just as a fixture. A warm body who could be counted on to keep things running while they lived the life I used to dream about. And I can't even blame them fully. I trained them that way. I said yes to every last-minute request, every "could you stay a little longer," every "you don't mind, do you?" until my own needs got so quiet I couldn't even hear them myself. There was a time I believed that being useful was the same thing as being loved. But standing at that sink, I realized usefulness had a shelf life, and mine had expired. After they left off to some school fundraiser with eco-friendly raffle baskets and tiny cupcakes, I wandered into the garage and pulled out the dusty cedar chest my husband built before he passed. Inside, neatly folded and untouched for years, was a yellow envelope labeled "Wine Country, 1989. We never made that trip. That year, Michael got sick with pneumonia, and we cancelled everything. I used the refund to buy a new washing machine. We never rebooked. He always said someday we'd go just us, but someday never came. I sat on the concrete floor, thumbing through old brochures and ticket stubs we'd saved anyway, and something in me just shifted. It wasn't rage, it wasn't grief. It was something quieter but firmer, like a door had opened in the back of my mind, and someone, maybe God, maybe me, was standing inside saying, "You don't need permission to walk through this." That night, I brewed a cup of chamomile, took out my old laptop, and Googled luxury villas in Sonoma County Vineyard View. And when I found the one, I booked it. Paid in full. No shared rooms, no bunk beds, No backup plans, just me. I didn't tell anyone, not because I wanted it to be a secret, but because for once it wasn't their business. It was mine. The next morning, I packed a suitcase quietly, 2 soft sweaters, a wide-brimmed hat I hadn't worn since 1992, and a lipstick shade called Wild Fig I'd bought on a whim and never had the courage to use. I looked in the mirror and said out loud, "This time you're not the spare seat." And for the first time in decades, I believed it. The drive to Sonoma took just under 2 hours. Fog rolled off the hills like a slow sigh, and for once no one in the passenger seat was asking me to turn down the radio or pass them a snack. It was just me and the road, and a GPS voice that kept mispronouncing Petaluma with embarrassing confidence. I'd left early before Michael and Tessa had even dropped off the kids. I knew their check-in wasn't until Friday. Mine was Tuesday. 3 full days where I wouldn't be Grandma Mom or Could You Just. I was just Eleanor Ward, guest of Villa Armonia, a name that felt like a promise I hadn't made, but desperately needed kept. The estate sat on a hillside, flanked by golden vines that reached for the sky like they were mid-prayer. A young man in a crisp navy uniform met me at the gravel drive. "Welcome, Ms. Ward," he said, reading my name from the guest list without hesitation. "We've been expecting you." "Not Mom? Not Mrs. Ward?" "Not can I help you, Mom?" Just me. He showed me to the villa, a standalone guest house on the edge of the property with a wraparound porch, a copper-soaking tub, and French doors that opened to a view so wide it made me dizzy. I set my bag down, slowly, half expecting someone to stop me. No one did. The kitchen was stocked with local cheeses fruit and a bottle of Pinot Gris chilling in a hammered silver bucket. I wasn't even sure I liked Pinot Gris. But I opened it anyway. I sat on the porch that afternoon, legs propped on a wicker ottoman, a novel in my lap I had no intention of reading. I just watched. Bees flitted from lavender bushes. A pair of deer moved through the trees beyond the fence. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for the next thing to do. I was simply being. At dinner, I dined alone on the villa's terrace restaurant. The host seated me without asking if I was waiting for someone. Just laid down a single menu, smiled, and said, "Enjoy, Ms. Ward." I ordered lamb chops, medium rare, and a salad with toasted walnuts and goat cheese. The woman across the patio looked over once, then again. I recognized that look. She thought I'd been stood up, or maybe widowed recently. I didn't correct her. I didn't need to. The next morning, I joined a walking tour of the vineyard. Just 5 of us, 2 couples, and me. Our guide, a woman named Raquel, with sunburnt shoulders and wine-coloured lipstick, offered us glasses of Grenache as we strolled between rows of vines, heavy with fruit. She asked where we were all from, and when it was my turn, I said simply, "South of Sacramento. I'm on a solo stay." One of the women gave me a pity smile. Raquel didn't. She raised her glass. To good taste. We toasted. I sipped. And I swear the wine tasted different than anything I'd had in years, not better, just unshared. It was mine fully. Later that day, I found the resort library, a quiet loft above the main lobby, with worn leather chairs and a fireplace that smelled like cedar, even though it wasn't lit. I sat there for hours, thumbing through art books I didn't pretend to understand, and reading a collection of Mary Oliver poems I'd never had time for at home. There was no clock in the room. I liked it that way. On the 3rd evening, I walked into town. Downtown Glen Ellen was charming in that curated way. Boutique shops with signs made of reclaimed wood wine bars with outdoor string lights, dog-friendly everything. I ducked into a bookstore on impulse and came out with a paperback called Late Bloomers, Women Who Found Themselves After 60. I read it in the bath that night, page after page, wrinkling in the steam. One quote I underlined. Sometimes it's not the world that cages you. It's the story you keep telling about who you are. That line followed me into sleep. On Friday morning, I heard them before I saw them. The familiar engine of Michael's SUV pulling into the guest parking. The thunk of a trunk, the excited squeals of children unbuckling seatbelts. I watched discreetly from the corner of the porch. Tessa was already on her phone. Michael was juggling 3 rolling bags and a car seat. Sadie was crying about her missing pink Crocs. Owen had jelly on his shirt. Chaos, neatly packaged. They didn't see me, and I didn't wave. They walked past the villa, heading toward the main check-in, unaware that I had arrived 3 days ahead of them, had eaten at the same restaurant they'd just posted about on Instagram, had already watched the sunrise from the best view on the property. I slipped back inside, closed the curtains. I wasn't ready to be found. Not yet. It was the wine tasting that did it. Saturday afternoon. The sun hung low over the hills, turning the vineyards gold like someone had struck a match to the leaves. Villa Armonia's sommelier, a tall man with silver hair and an accent I couldn't place, stood beneath a white trellis, announcing pairings of Syrah with dark chocolate and Petit Verdot with spiced almonds. A soft string quartet played in the distance. I had arrived early not by accident. I wanted the seat near the corner, half shaded with a clear view of the vines. A glass of deep red sat in front of me, its rim catching the light. I wasn't thinking of Michael or Tessa or who might arrive. I was thinking of the way the breeze felt on my neck of the woman across the table who complimented my blouse and asked which perfume I wore. Vetiver, I said, smiling. And something old I don't remember the name of. She laughed. Elegant. It was the first time anyone had used that word about me in years. Then I heard it. Is this the tasting event, Tessa's voice? That unmistakable edge of forced politeness. A rustle of chairs. New arrivals. Michael stood a few feet from me, squinting into the sunlight, one hand resting on Owen's shoulder. Tessa adjusted her cardigan, blinking at the seating arrangement, like it had personally insulted her. The children fidgeted. They hadn't seen me yet. Then the sommelier cleared his throat. Before we begin, he said, his voice strong and theatrical, we'd like to thank our premium guests this weekend, especially Ms. Eleanor Ward, who has been staying in our private Ridgeview villa. Ms. Ward, thank you for joining us for the full week of tastings. A round of applause, if you will. Heads turned, hands clapped, and then silence. Tessa froze mid-sip. Michael blinked like someone had shined a flashlight in his eyes. Owen's mouth fell open. Sadie waved because of course she did. I didn't move right away. Just lifted my glass, nodded and said, "Thank you. It's been lovely." And then I smiled. Not smug, not spiteful. Just present. It landed like a thunderclap. Michael started walking toward me a little too fast, like he wasn't sure if he should shake my hand or drag me behind a tree to ask what the hell I was doing there. "Mum," he said, quiet, uncertain. "Michael." I turned my chair slightly. Tessa. Kids. Polite. Cool. The same tone they'd used with me for years. "I didn't know you were coming," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a protest. "No one asked," I replied, sipping the wine. Tessa was already adjusting. I could see the wheels turning. She reached for a crumb on Sadie's cheek like it mattered. "You're staying here in the Ridgeview for the week." I looked out toward the vines. It's beautiful. Quiet. I arrived Tuesday. I let that settle. "You've been here the whole time," Michael's voice pitched up. I turned my gaze back to him and held it. "I have." A beat passed, a swallow, a blink. Then, "Well, we're glad you're enjoying it." "Very much." The sommelier, sensing the shift, clapped his hands and began the tasting in earnest. Guests turned back to their glasses. The moment passed, publicly at least. But under the surface, something had cracked. Michael and Tessa didn't linger. They didn't know how to sit with me after that. They excused themselves early. The kids need a snack or some other excuse too flimsy to hold, and left before the dessert wine was served. I stayed. Listened to the quartet finish a piece by Vivaldi, took a chocolate truffle from the silver tray, let my name ring in the air a little longer. Later that night, as I sat on my villa's porch, wrapped in a blanket, a soft knock came at the gate. It was Owen. "I saw you," he whispered, like he was confessing to a crime. "I saw you before Daddy did." I didn't say anything. I opened the gate. "Come in," I said. He sat beside me in silence for a long time. "Then you looked like a queen." I blinked. "What do you mean, at the wine thing? When they said your name?" "Everyone looked at you." I smiled. "And what did you think?" He shrugged. I thought, maybe you liked not being found. I looked at him closely then. My grandson, 9 years old, quiet, watchful. Maybe the only one who'd really seen me all along. "I did," I said. "I really did." He leaned into my side. I wrapped an arm around him. Neither of us said anything else for a long time. The next morning, Michael showed up at my villa. He didn't knock right away. Just stood at the gate, hands in his pockets, staring at the grapevines like they might give him the words he hadn't found the night before. I saw him through the kitchen window as I poured my coffee, the good, dark roast I'd discovered on the first day, the kind with undertones of chocolate and quiet satisfaction. I didn't rush to greet him. Eventually, he knocked soft, like he wasn't sure if he wanted me to answer. I opened the door. "Hey," he said. "Morning?" He looked down. "You have a nice place here." "I know." I let the door swing open wider. "Want to sit?" He hesitated, then stepped inside. The living room was filled with light. I'd left the curtains open to the morning sun. A book lay face down on the ottoman. My sandals were kicked off by the door. "This isn't what I expected," he said. "I guess I didn't think you'd come." "I know," I said, sitting across from him. "You planned a family trip without including me. Why would I show up?" He winced. "It wasn't that we didn't want you there." I raised an eyebrow. "Michael, I was in the pantry. I heard you." He blinked. "You what I heard Tessa say it would be harder with me around. I heard you agree." He sat back. The silence was thick. "I didn't mean—" "You did?" I said, not harshly, maybe not cruelly, but honestly, I prefer honesty at this point. He looked at his hands. "It's just, things get complicated. The kids, the schedule. Tessa gets overwhelmed. And I guess we thought that I'd slow you down." He nodded, shame creeping in. "I'm sorry, Mum." I believed him. But I also knew that sorry had an expiration date when it came after convenience. You know, I said leaning forward, I never expected gratitude. But I did expect respect. I do respect you. "Do you?" I asked. "Because I don't think you've looked at me in years. I mean, really looked." He swallowed hard. "You've always just managed everything. You never asked for much. I guess I didn't realize that I had needs, dreams, limits." I softened my tone. "Michael, I stopped asking a long time ago. It didn't feel worth it. I thought if I just kept being helpful, I'd stay needed. And if I was needed, I was safe." He looked up at me, then really looked. There was something in his face I hadn't seen since he was a boy. Uncertainty, vulnerability. I didn't know, he said again. "You didn't want to know." We sat in silence. "Mom," he said finally, "can we fix this?" I sighed. "I don't know yet. Maybe." but I need you to understand something. I'm not coming back to how things were. He nodded slowly. Fair. I'm not your babysitter. I'm not your contingency plan. I'm your mother. And I deserve a place at the table, not the leftovers. He nodded again, firmer this time. Behind him, the door creaked open slightly, Owen peeking through. I smiled. Come in, sweetheart. He rushed in, straight to my side, like he belonged there. Michael stood. I'll give you two some time. Thank you, I said. As the door closed, Owen turned to me, serious. Is Dad in trouble? I laughed. No. He's just learning something. Are you mad at them? No, I said. Just tired of being quiet. He climbed up beside me. I'm glad you came. I'm glad I did too. That afternoon I wandered into town. No schedule, no obligations. I browsed an antique shop, lingered at a pottery studio. At one cafe I ordered a tart, just because it had my name in the description, Eleanor's Blackberry Creme. The barista smiled when I laughed. Back at the villa, a note was waiting for me. Written in careful, unfamiliar print, Dear Grandma. I drew your house at school, but it didn't have enough windows. I'll fix it when I get home. Can I come visit next weekend? Love, Owen. I pressed the note to my chest. Later, there was a knock at the door. Not Michael. Not Owen. Tessa. She held a bottle of wine, the same vintage I'd been sipping that first night, and looked like she hadn't slept well. Her usual armor was gone, no gloss, no lashes, just a woman who looked human. May I? She asked. I nodded and stepped aside. I owe you an apology, she said. Not just for the trip, for everything. I've made it too easy to ignore how much you do, and who you are. I didn't say anything. She held up the wine. Peace offering. I accepted the bottle. We'll start small. She nodded. Small is good. Saturday night brought the Harvest Masquerade. It was the kind of event designed for Instagram velvet ropes, fairy lights strung through old oak trees, a string quartet warming up under the arbor, and guests in flowing dresses and sharp suits moving like honey through the dusk. I almost didn't go. I'd pulled the navy dress from my suitcase twice already that day. Once before breakfast, once after tea. Each time I held it up, stared at it, then folded it back. It felt too much, too elegant, too exposed. As if wearing it might confirm that I wanted to be noticed, and that somehow still felt dangerous. But around 7, I caught my own reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had better posture than the one I remembered. Her hair was up silver streaks woven like ribbons. Her eyes were steady. And the mask, deep violet velvet with delicate beading, made her look like someone with secrets she wasn't ashamed to keep. I slipped on the dress. It floated when I moved. I arrived just as the musicians started their first waltz. I lingered near the edge of the courtyard, sipping a glass of sparkling rosé, watching the dancers spin. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't anything. I was just there, fully. And then I felt it someone watching. Across the courtyard by the dessert table stood Michael. No mask, no costume. Just a pressed shirt hands tucked awkwardly into his pockets. His eyes searched the crowd until they landed on me, and then stopped. Tessa stood beside him, her expression unreadable. Owen peeked from behind her wide-eyed. Sadie tugged at her arm, more interested in the chocolate fountain. They hadn't known I'd be here. Of course not. This wasn't the kind of event Grandma attended. This was for the young, the bold, the carefree. But I wasn't here to blend in. I was here to arrive. As I turned away from them, a voice at my shoulder said, "May I?" I looked up into kind eyes behind a simple black mask. Henry. The widower I'd met briefly at the library, then again at breakfast. Retired journalist, crisp voice, thoughtful silences. The man who'd once said, "You seem like someone who used to lead the room." I smiled. "You may." We danced. Slowly at first, then with a kind of rhythm I didn't know I still had. He didn't speak much, didn't ask too many questions, just moved with me, steady and sure. "I almost didn't come," I said after a turn. "I'm glad you did," he said. It's nice to see someone who remembers how to live in her own skin. We twirled once more. Over his shoulder I saw them again, Michael and Tessa still standing at the edge of the crowd, watching, unsure, uninvited. Let them. Let them see the woman they'd forgotten existed. Not out of spite, but because I wasn't theirs to define anymore. As the song ended, Henry bowed slightly and kissed my hand. "You're not hiding," he said. "I'm choosing," I replied. That night, back in the villa, I didn't remove my mask right away. I poured a glass of water, stood by the window, and watched the last of the guests filter out. The music faded. The lights dimmed. And I stood there, masked, barefoot alone, feeling not invisible, but deliberately present. Later, I placed the mask on the nightstand beside Owen's note. 2 different kinds of truths, one spoken in a child's handwriting, the other worn proudly across my face. Let them wonder. Let them remember. Let them see. The morning after the masquerade was quiet. Too quiet for a resort at full occupancy. No children splashing in the pool, no staff hauling brunch trays across the courtyard. Just the rustling of vines in the wind and the hush of Sunday beginning slowly. I stayed in bed longer than usual, the silk sleep mask from my welcome kit still tucked loosely over my eyes. The party lingered in my muscles, my calves sore from dancing, my cheeks faintly tender from all the smiling. A kind of soreness I welcomed, proof I'd taken up space again. By the time I padded barefoot to the kitchen, the breakfast tray had already been delivered. A note sat on top, folded in thirds, my name on the front, in Michael's handwriting. "Mum, just you and me. Breakfast on the terrace, 9 a.m. No speeches, no guilt, just coffee and time. M. I read it twice. Then placed it beside Owen's drawing and the velvet mask, a small shrine of truth. I didn't go. Not out of defiance, not to punish. I just wasn't ready. For decades, I'd answered without thinking. To the doorbell, to the phone, to the cries, the carpool needs. The favor phrased as a compliment. Yes had become my default. That morning I chose something different. Silence. Instead I walked. Slowly. Down past the stables, across the path that looped through the olive trees, hands tucked behind my back, like my grandfather used to do after church. I didn't check the time. The only clock I trusted anymore was the one inside my chest. By noon, I found myself at the little cafe tucked behind the main building. The one with the mismatched chairs and lemon rosemary scones no one seemed to talk about, but everyone found eventually. Teresa was already there. Wide straw hat, crossword puzzle, open, coffee, half drunk. She looked up as I approached and smiled like we'd been doing this for years. "I heard you danced," she said. "I did," I replied. "Did they see you?" "Oh, yes." She chuckled. Good. We sipped our drinks in companionable silence. At one point, she reached across and tapped my hand lightly. "Whatever you decide to do next, don't shrink back." "I won't," I said. And I meant it. That evening I returned to my villa early. No parties, no invites, just a quiet bath, a simple dinner, and a book I wouldn't finish. Before I turned in, I slipped out to the porch. The vines were dark now, outlined only by the moon. Somewhere in the distance I heard laughter, familiar voices maybe, but I didn't lean in to listen. Let them laugh. Let them wonder if I'd show up tomorrow. For once, I didn't need to chase anything. Peace had finally caught up to me. They returned home Monday afternoon. I waited until Thursday. Not because I was avoiding them, but because the rhythm of my own life had changed. And I wasn't about to unlearn it in 3 days. On Thursday morning, I baked banana bread. Real banana bread, not the box mix, kind I'd used in a pinch. I sifted the flour. I mashed the ripest bananas. I added walnuts because that's what I liked, not because anyone else preferred it plain. I set out cloth napkins. I brewed the good coffee. And then I opened my door. It was the first time in years I'd invited them to my house for a meal. Usually I showed up with foil-covered trays or pre-sliced fruit, quietly setting up, while Tessa rearranged furniture. This time they were guests in my space. Michael arrived first with Owen. He brought tulips, a clumsy but sweet gesture. Tessa came next, holding Sadie's hand. She didn't bring anything, just herself. Good. Wow, Owen whispered, looking around. It smells better than the bakery. I smiled. That's the bananas. And the butter. We ate at my kitchen table. No booster seats, no distractions, just mismatched plates and warm bread and the sound of children chewing with full mouths. Tessa offered to help wash dishes. I let her. After lunch, Owen tugged on my sleeve. I drew you something. He handed me a folded sheet of printer paper edges, curled crayon lines, bold and intentional. It was a map, the kind only a child could understand, looping lines and oversized trees, a sun in the corner, smiling with too many teeth. At the center, a house with a front porch. On the roof, a little figure in purple arms raised. Grandma's place. I blinked. You're in the middle now, he said very seriously. Not on the edge. I pulled him in arms tight around his narrow shoulders. That's exactly where I belong. That night after they left, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, the map folded in my lap like a blessing. The wind was soft. The stars were out. I wasn't waiting for a call. I wasn't bracing for anything. I had no script to follow. No silence to swallow. Just this, a house that smelled like bread, a boy who redrew the map, and a life that finally fit. And this time, I didn't ask for a seat at the table. I set the table myself. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we live with quietly, the slow erosion of identity in the name of usefulness, the years spent being supportive while slowly becoming invisible. The spare seat is more than a story about being excluded from a family trip. It's about what happens when someone stops waiting to be invited and begins choosing herself. For many, especially women who've spent decades putting others first, the idea of reclaiming space can feel foreign, even selfish. But it isn't. It's justice. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't seek revenge but restores dignity. This story reminds us that love without respect is not love at all. That silence can be as harmful as cruelty, and that self-worth isn't granted, it's remembered. Sometimes the most profound transformation doesn't come from confrontation, but from refusing to be erased. To anyone who has felt like the backup plan in their own life, let this be your sign you don't need to wait for permission to take up space. You always deserved a seat, maybe not at their table, but certainly at your own. If this story touched something in you, let us know in the comments. Have you ever felt unseen by the people closest to you? Like this video to support stories that honor quiet strength and real emotional journeys. And don't forget to subscribe. We share more narratives that help us make sense of life, love, and the quiet revolutions happening every day. Until next time, may you find peace in the space you claim and the power in finally being seen.